Taking notes. You know, it's something we all do, but have you ever stopped to think of it as a skill? Something you can actually get good at? Well, you can. And today, we're going to break down how to turn this simple act into a seriously powerful tool for learning and remembering. All right, let's get into it.
So we've all been there, right? You're sitting in a class or maybe a meeting and you're nodding along. Everything is making perfect sense. You feel like, yep, I got this. But then, the next day, you try to remember the important stuff and it's all just kind of fuzzy.
Look, if that happens to you, it's not a personal failure, I promise. It's actually a documented psychological thing called the forgetting curve. It basically shows how our memory of new information just plummets unless we actively do something to stop it. The best way to fight it? Reviewing what you learned, especially using a technique called spaced repetition.
And just how fast do we forget? It's kind of shocking, really. Studies have shown that without any review, we can lose over 60%, 62% of what we just learned in a single day. That's a huge amount of information just gone.
So how do we fight back against this natural decay of memory? Well, the answer is effective note-taking. And I really got to stress that word, effective. Because it's not about just mindlessly writing down every single word you hear. It's about actively engaging with the ideas.
Let's completely reframe what note-taking actually is. It's not some boring, passive chore. When you do it right, it's an active process of learning. It's basically one of the best cognitive power tools you have.
So this definition really breaks it down. Look at those words: acquiring, filtering, organizing, restructuring. It's a full-on mental workout. You're forced to listen, decide what's important, see how things connect, and then build your own version of the knowledge. That right there is where the magic happens.
And this is not just some academic skill for students. I mean, check this out. These are President Jimmy Carter's actual notes from a private meeting with Pope John Paul II. In these super high-stakes situations where every single detail matters, taking good notes is absolutely essential for capturing what's really going on.
So how do we approach this? Well, generally speaking, pretty much every note-taking system you've ever heard of falls into one of two big categories. And understanding this basic difference is the first step to finding a method that really works for you. Let's dig in.
On one hand, you've got linear notes. This is what most of us start out with. They follow the information as it's presented, one point after another. They're structured, they're focused on the text. On the other hand, you've got nonlinear notes. These are way more visual and associative. They're all about connecting ideas, usually spreading out from a central point instead of just following a straight line.
Okay, theory is great, but let's make this real. We're going to take a super quick look at one classic example from each of those categories, just to see these ideas in action.
All right, first up, a linear method you definitely know, the outline. This is probably the most familiar system out there. It's really the backbone of structured thinking, and for good reason. It makes the logical relationship between ideas super clear. The structure is so simple and so effective. You've got your main topics, then you indent for your subtopics, and indent again for the details. It's perfect for a lecture that's already really organized, because you can just mirror that structure right on your page.
Okay, now let's do a complete 180. If outlining is all about structure and logic, mind mapping is all about association and creativity. This is a huge favorite for anyone who's a visual learner.
So with a mind map, instead of going from top to bottom, you start with one big idea smack in the middle of the page, and then you branch out. You connect related ideas with lines, use colors, use drawings. It's less about capturing every single word and more about seeing the big picture and how all the ideas relate to each other.
So no matter which system you choose, linear, nonlinear, or some mix of the two, there are a few universal tips that will just make your notes so much better. Let's run through a few of these, rapid fire.
First up, develop your own shorthand. Here's why this is a game changer. The average person speaks at around 150 words per minute, but most of us can only write about 30. You just can't keep up. So creating your own symbols, like an arrow for leads to or a star for this is important, helps you close that speed gap so you can focus on the ideas, not just on writing. Second tip, leave plenty of white space on the page. I know it might feel like you're wasting paper, but trust me, that empty space is your future thinking space. It gives you room to go back later and add new thoughts, clarify things, or draw connections that you didn't see at first.
Third, listen for the signposts. A good speaker will literally tell you what's important. Listen for phrases like, the key takeaway here is, or if you remember one thing, it's this. And hey,
If they repeat a concept over and over, that's your brain's cue to write it down.
Number 4, and this one is so important. Review your notes within 24 hours. Remember that forgetting curve we talked about? This is your #1 weapon against it. That quick review soon after you learn something signals to your brain, hey, this is important, and it starts moving that information into your long-term memory.
And finally, maybe the biggest tip of all, synthesize. Don't just transcribe. Your goal is not to be a court reporter, okay? Your goal is to understand the material. Forcing yourself to put the ideas into your own words, that is the ultimate test. It's the difference between just hearing something and actually learning it.
And that act of synthesizing, of making the ideas your own, brings us to a final, really crucial question about why we're even taking notes in the first place.
So there have been these fascinating studies that compare students who take notes by hand versus on a laptop. And what they found is pretty wild. Even though typing is obviously faster, the students who wrote by hand actually did better on questions about the concepts. The theory is that because handwriting is slower, it forces you to summarize and synthesize as you go, that deeper processing we were just talking about. The speed of typing, on the other hand, can trick you into just mindlessly transcribing everything.
And that is the thought I really want to leave you with. The next time you sit down and take notes, ask yourself, is my goal right now just to capture information so I can remember it later? Or is my goal to truly understand it right here in this moment? Because the method you choose and the mindset you bring to the table can make all the difference in the world.